welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to another episode of the Owl's Nest. I'm your host, your hope. I am also the hope of the future. I am your host, Robbie Landis, and along with me, as always, Jake Lyon. Jake, how's it going, man?
I'm doing great. Psyched for this week.
Yeah, and you know, actually, I suppose I'm not quite the hope for the future. We got the results back from our fantasy draft from last week, and oh my, was it more? Look, I didn't expect to win. I really didn't. Going up against, you know, the almighty Jake Rat, I knew that it was an uphill battle, but I did not expect to be stomped as bad as I did. Looking at the results here, you had 86.1%, and I had a measly 13.9. Ouch.
Easy clap.
My lineup wasn't
kind of
that
a beat down.
bad, was it?
I'll take a page out of my boy Super's book, dominating the competition with relative ease. No problem.
Yeah, I guess so. You know what? We'll come back to this fantasy draft again in the future. I will find some way to redeem myself. But
I'll be happy to take you out even worse.
Yeah. I don't know if it can get any worse. I'm just happy to be above 10%, if I'm being completely honest. That means 1 in 9, my team may have beat yours. But all right, we're gonna put that behind us. We're not gonna speak of it ever again, and we're gonna jump into the takeaways from this last week here at the Washington Homestand. And I want to start with what we called our match of the week, which was still good to watch, but was honestly a little bit one-sided, and that was the Philadelphia Fusion versus the New York Excelsior. Now, at first, it seemed like New York, I don't know if they just hadn't woken up or what it was, but they looked like a completely different team in that first half. What was it that either the Fusion was doing or that New York wasn't doing that allowed the Fusion to get that 2-0 lead on them?
Well, I think, Fusion just came out really strong, and New York, maybe some of the cracks started to show in the roster. I think, like to Flame's point with Carpe on this McCree, he really is that X factor, and Sabiolbi also a strong McCree player, but I'd say Carpe has an edge there, and I think that can really have an impact, as the match goes on, and I think it's especially the confidence that Philly is riding with their win streak. I mean, this sort of cements that confidence, but I think they're certainly feeling themselves. They've got the rookie players who are kind of popping off, proving that maybe they should have been in the league all along. Well, alarm scale. I think maybe both of them were too young, actually, to play before. So you've got like this feeling that you've got this undiscovered talent driving your team in the back line, and you've got the consistency and the confidence with, Poco and Carpe getting really aggressive in the front line, Ivy and Sato doing their job on May and Ryan. Which is all you can ask of them in this meta. So I just think Philly has that super strong all-around roster, and they've got the confidence. And if you come out strong with a player like Carpe, with a player like Poco, they're just able to find so many pickoffs that, if you're in New York, you're wondering what happened those first two maps. I mean, it was so fast, so aggressive from Philly. So.
Yeah, and obviously New York did kind of wake up a little bit in the end there. They did take one map, but Philly still managed to stay just a step ahead of them and come out of that series 3-1. Now, for those of you wondering, Jake just mentioned Flame. We actually do have him. He's going to be joining us for our second segment coming up here in just a little while to talk about some of the top-tier teams, so look forward to that. I think the other big surprise this weekend was Washington went 0-2 at their own homestand, and one of those matches was against the London Spitfire, which, again, the first two matches, Washington had such a dominant start against them, and then the massacre at Dorado happened. They basically sent the Washington Justice back to the room with no dinner. That has to be the most dominant first point hold on Dorado we've ever seen. What the heck happened?
I mean, that's just brutal, really, because it's not supposed to happen like that. I mean, getting held close to your spawn is pretty hard to do just because you have such a big spawn advantage on attack. All you have to do is trade one kill, the other way, and that immediately cracks. So, you have to be feeling for the Justice, especially in front of their home crowd. I think the home crowd can be a bit of a double-edged sword, though. Like, once you start losing a couple fights in front of your own spawn, and the crowd is like kind of quiet, they're like, oh, this is not, I can't cheer yet, like nothing's happened that's good yet. I think that can start to get in your own head if you're the Washington Justice. So I mean, from London's perspective, well played, but I think that's beyond anyone's expectations. Like, if you're London, you're holding forward, you're like, oh, let's get some time, maybe we win a fight, maybe two, get some ults. That'll set us up really well for the choke that we actually care about. And then you just keep winning fights, and it just gets out of control. So I think from Justice perspective, it's pretty hard to like mentally come back from that sort of a dominant hold. Like, you just get kind of crushed in your own spawn, and everybody knows, like, you had to make mistakes to even make that a possibility on the Justice side. Like, if everybody plays equally well, you don't get held in your own spawn like that. So, Justice really just feeling the pain there. But respect to London. I mean, looking like they really, I feel like this is a team that has those really bright flashes of greatness, and then a couple, cracks begin to show. But, when it all comes together, they're showing that they will be like a playoff contender, I think.
Oh, no, yeah, it's definitely very exciting to see for a rookie roster. And then the last match that I wanted to touch on, the battle of the bottom of the league, and that was the Houston Outlaws versus the Boston Uprising. Look, everyone said this was going to be at least an entertaining match, but I don't think anyone knew how right they were as they went to a historic regular season Game 7. What was it about this match that really stood out to you from either sides of these teams?
Besides the massive number of draws, I would say I think that Boston was really, really aggressive. They did a great job, like, trying to take control of the match by constantly flanking and utilizing this insane mobility of the Lucio Diva combo to just kind of swarm in and try and start the fight with +1. I think that sort of aggression works really, really well this patch. And if you don't deal with it perfectly, I think it can really catch you off guard, if you're Houston. But that was, I mean, you can't really have a closer match than that, right? With that many draws and everything. So I feel like, if anything, we're waiting for like the rematch or waiting for more from both of these teams, because this was about as close as you can possibly be in a series.
All right, well, that's going to wrap it up for this first segment here, guys. Don't go anywhere. We have the general manager of the Houston Outlaws, Flame, joining us next to talk about the top-tier teams in the league and how they managed to stay there.
The 2019 Game Awards are in the book, and look.
If I didn't see it for myself, and Nate would have been like, I really liked it. I'd be like, okay, cool. Make sure I never touch.
Jean-Paul says, I pre-ordered no.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for sticking with us here on the Owl's Nest. Remember that you can reach out to us on social medias. We'd love to know what you guys think about all the stuff that we talk about here. Give us your own opinions. You can do that at CheckpointXP on Twitter. You can also find me personally at Robbie_LandisCP on Twitter, and Jake at JakeOW. Joining us today, we have a special guest, our first guest here on the Owl's Nest, and that is the general manager of the Houston Outlaws, Matt Flame Rodriguez. Matt Flame Rodriguez. We have Flame here today because apparently I have mush mouth and I can't say words. Flame, welcome and thank you for joining us, man.
Thank you for having me.
So what we're going to do here today is, on a few episodes before, we talked a little bit about what we thought of some of these rookie teams, the Los Angeles Valiant, the London Spitfire, and kind of the Boston Uprising as well. And so we wanted to flip that around a little bit and talk about the top tier teams within the league and how it is that they managed to stay up in the top echelons. So we're going to start with the New York Excelsior, probably one of the top flights that have been from day one. And they have been, unlike any other team, they have actually managed to be in every single finals that we've had, whether it was a stage final or the playoffs, but they've only actually managed to take the full prize pool twice, and that was in the inaugural season. They took 2 stage finals. So, Jake, let's start with you. What is it about the New York Excelsior that allows them to stay within the top 3? I think they've been top 3 in all 3 past seasons here.
Well, for me, I mean, if you just look at where the roster's been consistent, it has to be Mono and Jonak. I mean, these players are just absolute monsters on their role. Like, Mono, so incredibly consistent. It feels like he's one of those players where you can't define his style. He's not aggressive. He's not defensive. He'll just play exactly how he needs to play in the moment. He can be explosively aggressive with the nano boost. He can be really passive defensive and just hold it down if that's what's called for. So he just has a great read on the game, and I think Jonak as well, adding on to that, gives them that potential to win any situation. All Mono has to do is hold it down and just keep the fight going. And I think that understanding of their respective roles in the game, and of course their incredible talent at executing in those roles, really keeps this team at the top despite any sort of DPS or off-tank rotations.
So if you're putting most of the responsibility or most of the power within those two, do you think that the rest of the team is pretty interchangeable?
I wouldn't say interchangeable. I mean, if you look at the rest of the line, like you look at the DPS roster, they've had a lot of different DPS. Everyone has been good. So it's a little, I mean, I guess, there's been not everyone's like at the top of the top in their DPS lineup, but everyone that they play on DPS they've always had solid players. They've always had solid performers on the roles that they needed them on. So I think the roster is really well managed when it comes to DPS, off tank and main support. Like they've always had somebody good. But I think that they've done a great job of like adapting those to be more specific to the meta and relying on Mono and Jonak to be these players that you like never ever sub out. But I think that from the rest of the lineup, it's like you can't get by with just two players carrying and everyone else not strong. Like obviously the rest of the lineup is still dominant, but it's just that they have the flexibility to rotate around this stable core of Mono and Jonak.
Now, Flame, the Houston Outlaws actually picked up a former Nixel player this past offseason in Meko. So, what sort of strengths does he bring to the team from New York?
I think he understands... Sorry, my voice is cracked. I think he understands like the mindset that Nixel had and also their culture. Outlaws obviously had its own culture, and I think Nixel's is vastly different in terms of how they operate from a coaching and execution standpoint. Meko's very outspoken. Like he's very open with his opinions and his criticisms, and he'll go to the coaches or the players and be like, hey, try this, do that, which I'm assuming is like a side effect of him having been on Nixel. And I think that open critique style that he's bringing to the Outlaws is something that seems like it must be apparent in New York, and I think it's been working pretty well for them. So something like that I think is super valuable from just a player and coach interaction perspective.
So at the risk of being assaulted by all the Nixel fans for having said this, I think that the one thing that kind of stands out from New York is they're dominant during regular season play, but whenever they get into those high-pressure situations when they really have to perform in order to make it to, whether it's a championship match or in the past a stage final, they've always sort of fell short, and I don't want to use the word choke, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. What do you think it is about New York that they can't quite seem to make it in those situations?
I think to Jake's point about the consistency of like Mono and Jonak and the roster, it's built around this like very solid foundation, but I would say that they also play very safe as a result. I think that like their understanding of the game is very straightforward and like they know what they have to be doing at any point in time, but at the expense of maybe taking more risks than other teams. So they'll always finish and play well, but they're very rarely super, super flashy, like save for Pine or Sabioli on occasion. At least the last couple of seasons. But they're not the team, in my opinion, that you expect to see like some flashy single-handed, stomp or carry performance from any of their players. They kind of just like get it done. But I think to be the best team, you need like players that are willing to leave it all on the line, if you will, and make the risks that maybe other players won't.
That's a great point. Jake, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that makes a lot of sense, right? Like they have such strong stability and it gives them a lot of results in the regular format. But like Flynn was saying, I think the higher the pressure gets, the more room for that sort of crazy risk-taking that there is. I think at the end of the day, like, in those high-pressure situations where everyone's focused and just doing the normal thing and playing the normal style, that's where you get the most value out of doing something a little bit crazy, being the one player in the match who's willing to go for a solo flank. And if it works, you win the game. If it doesn't work, you probably lose. And you basically just flip the coin on your own. And that's something that I think is pretty hard to do probably on a team where it's so structured and they're so consistent. Probably that's pretty well discouraged. You'll occasionally see that from Sabioli, but only when, the fight's already in a tough spot that he knows he has to take a big risk. He won't be like opening up with a crazy flank, which is one of those things that we've seen a lot of success out of, teams like Shock, I would say, like putting Sinatra in a ridiculous position where it's like do or die for him. But then they just give everything to protect him and it works out for them, or it did last season. So I think that's a good point that like in those high pressure situations, you do need to get a little bit crazier, if you will, like a little bit more wild with the risk taking. And it's probably hard to get in that mindset when you've had so much success with just this consistent team focused play style. But I still think they could succeed with that play style. Like I don't think it's necessary, let's say, to take that sort of risks. I think if they are all really performing at top level, I think they can do this defensive game plan and just outplay with like the no weird strategies, no meta shifts, the Nixel classic, just running the meta down mid and just doing it better than you. So I think it's still possible to win that way, but I think it's a great point about risk taking.
Well, and speaking of the San Francisco Shock, we'll go ahead and talk about them next. Technically, back in the inaugural season, they were around the middle of the pack, but obviously last season, putting Super and Sinatra, sort of in the main the whole time, being on the starting of the roster, they did incredible things. So, what is it that the San Francisco Shock have that nobody else does that allows them to sort of play and just exist at this level that they're at, Jake?
I mean, this is a team that is just like, I talked about this in my preseason predictions. It's just an embarrassment of riches in so many positions. I mean, their DPS lineup could easily start on 2L teams at minimum, maybe more. Like every single player on DPS, I think, has like a hero or two that they are literally the best in the world at, or are seriously in the conversation for best in the world on their preferred comfort picks. And you have so many players that, like Sinatra, have proven that is no longer, he was known as this tracer player, flanker player. But now I think he's really expanded that role and has developed into a much more broad player and someone who they can rely on to start like a huge percentage of the time. And that's really impressive considering he's competing for playtime with Striker and Architect and Rascal. It's just that I think their DPS lineup for me is like the most insane. But then you've got Super so good at the Rhine. Smurf covers him on the other main tanks. I still think Super and Smurf, they're both fine on each other's main tanks, but Super is just at his best on Rhine, in my opinion, and Smurf's at his best on the other main tanks. So it's like a natural fit. And you've got Choi, who, like, don't sub Choi out. You'd be crazy to sub Choi out. That's why they had to trade away Nevix, because it's like Nevix is insane, but Choi is perhaps the best in the world. He was my pick for MVP, honestly. That's my prediction this season, is that he gets MVP. And then you've got Moth and Violet on support. Moth, I think, is hugely underrated just because, like, maybe you can't really know about how useful it is to have a great main caller on a team unless you actually play on the team. Like, you can't see that in the game. You just see that in the collective decision making of the whole team being solid, being on point. Everyone's seeming like informed. They're not making crazy plays that don't make sense with the ults. Like, it seems like they always know what's going on in the game. And that's Moth, right? Like, that's his communication. That's his understanding of the game. And on top of that, of course, he's mechanically almost perfect on Lucio. So I think that they just really have it all on every role. So, I mean, it's pretty hard to question this team. I think they're going to win again, personally.
So we've actually only seen them play one match so far this season against the Dallas Fuel, which was a 3-1 match. And, Dallas had some pretty decent matches there. But, Flame, I have to ask you, seeing the small performances that we have so far, do you think that the San Francisco Shock are still going to be leagues above the rest of the teams in the league? Or do you think that, given the offseason and some of the time to see how they've developed over the past season, that maybe some of the other teams might have had a chance to catch up?
I'll be interested to see how this like China-Korea homestand situation pans out and like how the matches wind up being played, because I think that like the volatility of that situation in terms of like how many matches they're going to be playing in 1 week, how much adaptability they'll have to create in those moments, it might, shake them up a little bit. But I think to Jake's point, it's like the team literally probably has a top 3 person in the league at every role. If not like top 10. And so when you have a roster that consistently good and just like that individually talented, but also under a structure, it's kind of scary. Like, I think that the Shock have done like a very incredible job of just like creating this team mindset and also this like selfless sort of mentality where every player is kind of playing for every other player. And you very rarely see like a player play selfishly or, out of line with the rest of what the team seems to be wanting to do. So I find it hard to think that they would be, too thrown off this season unless they wind up, contracting the flu or some crazy thing happens with travel that throws them off. But on like paper, if you just threw them in a match right now against anyone, I find it hard to believe that they would lose. And I feel like it'll stay like that for a while. Maybe Hero Pools shakes them up a little bit because their strategy has to change or the way that they have to play has to change. But even then, like, if it came down to a pub of just Shock versus every other team in the league, I think that you can make a case that Shock should win. And that's kind of the scary part, I think, for me.
Well, and also talking about the other scary team from 2019, we have the Vancouver Titans, who, unlike the Shock, have changed up a little bit. They released their tank line in Bumper and Tizzy and picked up Fissure. They also have Ryu Jaehong in there as well. So I have to know from you guys, do you think that the Titans are going to be as dominant as what they were when they were fully Team Runaway? Or with the new additions, do you think that they could end up sliding back a little bit or stronger than they were before?
I just think you couldn't have picked better players to pick up. I just think it's basically perfect pickups from like the staff of the Titans. So I definitely want to appreciate them for that, because you took this team with insane skill and dominance with a bunch of rookies in the Overwatch League, and now you've added 2 veteran presences who, Fisher's been around the block, seen a lot of teams. Jaehong kind of on the other side of the spectrum has like been a really consistent leader on an existing, I would call Seoul like, upper mid-table team. So you bring these 2 experienced players with like all the wealth of experience that maybe the rest of your roster was lacking, that kind of led to a weak Grand Finals performance last season. But like, remember, before Grand Finals, there wasn't anything you could say was weak about the Titans' performance. So from my perspective, you put those veterans in the lineup, I think you're just going to build on the consistency, and you already have the peaks, right? Like, you already have the potential of that incredible talented roster, and now you just kind of stabilize that with a couple veterans. So I would imagine Twilight's still starting over Jaehong most of the time, but it doesn't mean Jaehong can't have an impact as like part of the team, affecting the culture, keeping everyone's mindset, in the right place so that they can succeed in those high pressure situations. And then I think Fissure is, personally, I just think he's better than Bumper. I think Bumper is a strong main tank, but actually to some extent is over aggressive, went like a little out of control sometimes. And when they played against the Shock, that was a real Achilles heel for them. So I think Fissure is going to be a more adaptable player and is going to find the way to win, whatever the situation is, whereas Bumper, I think, was just a little too one-dimensional for a roster so talented. So in my book, Vancouver Titans have significantly upgraded during the offseason, and Shock is, they're insanely strong, but they're about as insanely strong as they were last season, right? Like Ans is a big pickup for Widowmaker, but it's not like a huge deal. Shock already had Striker and Architect, insane Widowmaker players. So I'm not like rating that pickup as super important. Whereas for the Titans, I think these pickups are huge, and I think they make them an even stronger team than they were last year. So if anyone can upset Shock, I think it's Titans. I think for me, it really does go 1-2. As regards like the last season standings, I think that is kind of carrying forward after Titans made these insane pickups.
And I think we'd be remiss not to talk about the Philadelphia Fusion, despite being 7th out of 12 in the inaugural season and still going to the grand finals. And last year, being pretty middle of the road. They were 10 out of 20 in regular season play, but this year so far they are on top of the world. They're 4-0 currently and seem to be just dominating just about everyone that they go up against. What is it about the Fusion this time around that suddenly has them just sort of dominating the world, as it would be?
I think right now the meta is very much dependent on your main tank, your diva, and your McCree player. I think Carpe right now is like I don't want to say he's at a peak because it's hard. It's like too early to say that, but he's definitely peaking in the matches that they're playing, and it's creating a lot of opportunities for people like Poco to kind of shine. I think that like their entire team play has been phenomenal, but even when they're losing fights, they just have this player that can randomly kill 3 people and you don't even know how it happened, or it just shouldn't happen. And he will, but like there's some players, I think, like when we played Boston, it felt like we were being flanked the entire time, and we scrimmed Philly a bit, but even watching the Philly matches, Carpe is not the kind of player to like consistently flank or always play behind the Rhine. And so you have this player that I think just reads the game phenomenally well and will, take the flanks when he feels like he needs to or feels like he can, and he's very rarely going to choke. And so when you have a player that can read the game as well as him and also hit the shots probably better than anybody, it creates a lot of opportunities for everyone on your team to breathe. And so I think we're seeing, people are talking about how good Sato is doing right now. People are talking about how good Poco is doing right now. I think a lot of that comes down to him and Ivy just like playing their roles really well. But I think Carpe is in like a class of his own right now when it comes to McCree, at least against the teams that they've played.
All right, and Jake, would you like to proselytize Sato a little bit more as well?
I think Sato's played great, but I think Flame makes a great point that highlighting Carpe as being dominant. I think everyone thinks of Carpe as a Widowmaker player because he had such absurd highlights on Widow in the past 2 seasons, frankly, just being one of the best in the whole league, which is an impressive title to be having in the Overwatch League. Impressive to be in consideration for that. But he was before that, I think before the Overwatch League, known as McCree as his best hero. So I think this is like kind of the perfect meta for Carpe, able to play McCree, able to bring out the Widow from time to time, and he is insanely dominant at it. But if I'm going to look at like what's different for Philly Fusion, for me it's the support line. It's Funny Astro and Alarm especially, but Funny Astro as well, playing so smart. So many situations where, he's playing the perfect position, understanding the game really well, like playing against dive. He knows he needs to separate, dodge the EMP, and, ends up preventing Surefour from using the EMP in a lot of situations. I think he's just got great positioning, great awareness, and then Alarm is just a complete monster, really accurate, just really quick. I saw him canceling Sombra hacks with, left clicks and whatnot, which is very hard to be doing. Like, a lot of Anas are going to throw a nade at the floor and just get the guaranteed cancel on the hack. But Alarm just turns around and instantly hits the first shot. If he misses one, then he probably gets hacked. He might die, but he doesn't miss, so it doesn't matter, I guess. So Alarm, for me, it just looks so sick. And so I think that support line is, building on the success of Carpe, Poco, and Sato, and Ivy as well, like, is that support line just keeping them up, keeping them fighting in so many tough situations. So I think Alarm is a huge pickup who can have a high impact this season.
Yeah, I think I glossed over Astro too. I think you could make a case, or I think that there's a case to be made if I was to like predict rookies of the year. I think Astro could probably take that at the end of the season, but I mean, it's a little early. I guess Alarm also would be a good nomination right now, but Astro as a player, like, we tried him out a little bit preseason, and he's like phenomenally talented. The kid's just like, he just knows, like, Lucio is just like his hero, and he plays it to like some absurd level that I think mechanically he's like top 5 on that hero. So, and his game sense and communication is also really good. So I think that the team is utilizing that to the best of their abilities, and it's definitely a full roster of talent, to Jake's point.
All right. Well, the last thing that I'd like to leave us here with then before we move on is out of these 4 teams, if you guys had to predict who's going to go the furthest, I know, Jake, you had mentioned, the Shock a little bit earlier, but these 4 teams here, who do you think has the better edge?
I mean, I'd still go Shock, but I just think that it's going to be an insane clash when we get to see Vancouver, Shock, and Philly. I mean, we already saw Philly take down New York, and it looked probably a little bit more one-sided than I would have personally expected going into it, but still, like, New York not making it easy on them, still fighting back. But especially these last 3 teams, Shock, Vancouver, and Philly, I mean, that's going to be really exciting. Like, any matches that involve these teams are very likely to be match of the week for me, just because I really want to see these teams clash.
I mean, I think I could see right now short-term Philly taking the match against both of them, but I think some of that might just be me thinking, I think that they're on like a hot streak and they're really feeling themselves, where I feel like we haven't really seen much of Shock and then none of Titans as far as I know. So early season, I see Philly just kind of riding out this wave of success. I think like towards the end of the season, we'll see if Shock can like mimic their success of last year, but I think Philly right now has like that edge just in terms of like mindset, where they feel very motivated and they're very like up to the challenge, where I don't know how much complacency would impact Shock or Titans at this moment in the season. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, Shock will reign supreme, but I think short term we'll see a lot more Philly going forward.
All right. And, we can't have you on the show and not ask you at least something about the Outlaws. Coming into this season, there have been a lot of high hopes, a lot of these great acquisitions that you guys picked up, but you've been facing a lot of challenges, both on the stage of play and behind the scenes. So I just have to know, going into this weekend, it's the Houston Homestand. How are the guys preparing, to bring home their first win?
I mean, the last 2 weeks have been pretty awful, obviously. From my perspective as like GM or just like traveling with them, it's been very exhausting for me in terms of just like travel. I think this week they finally get a little bit of a rest. It's not a rest at all because it's our homestand, but from the player's perspective, that's a lot less stressful than flying. From my perspective, it's like 10 times worse. But I think from like from a team aspect, I think this week the crowd will be there. I think the players are motivated. I think a lot of our mistakes were apparent and also surprising to the staff in terms of like how the matches went down. I think there was a lot of like, why are we doing this? Like, we didn't coach this way, or stuff like that. But I think the players are aware of everything that's been going wrong. And I think that this week will be the week where it's like, okay, let's build off of the last 2 weeks. Let's like pretend that like, move on essentially and look forward. But they're feeling confident. I think we felt confident every weekend, as dumb as that sounds for how poorly we performed. But I think this week is like, I don't want to say this week's going to be different, but I think it will be different. And I think that having the fans there and like that atmosphere of Houston fans, that's always been like this weird, I mean, Jake will tell you, it's been like this weird concept. Like everyone's always talking about like, oh, when Houston throws a homestand, they're going to have the most people there. And like, it's finally like time to put up or shut up for the fans in some capacity, because we've always had this very large group behind us, and this will be the first week that we actually get to realize it. or feel it ourselves, and that's really, really exciting from, I think, mine and the players' perspective.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Flame. We look forward to having you on again in the future and seeing how the Outlaws hopefully perform this weekend. Up next, we're going to take a look at the matches coming up this week at the Houston Outlaws homestand and give you what we think is going to be the match of the week.
What's up, guys? I'm Kevin Kelly for CheckpointXP on campus, and we're here today at the HyperX Esports Arena at the Luxor, Las Vegas, for a very special event featuring the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, NASCAR Heat 4, and 3-time NASCAR Rookie of the Year, William Byron. All right, so we're here with William Byron, pro NASCAR driver. We just wrapped up playing a couple games in NASCAR Heat 4. How you doing, man?
Good.
Just getting right into it. Do you think, like, with NASCAR, jumping both feet first into esports, establishing their own league, do you think that, that'll, allow other esports titles, especially those in racing, the Gran Turismos, the Forzas, do you think, they'll be able to kind of, benefit from that support?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, anytime that, NASCAR puts their name on something, it's definitely becomes a bigger deal. So I think that, seeing how much they've done with iRacing and kind of how much iRacing's, benefited from the coverage that NASCAR's given is really good. And I think it's just going to continue to get better.
Is the NASCAR Heat 5 cover a goal for you in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, I was on the NASCAR Heat 3 games, so I think, that was a really cool game to be a part of, and kind of interested to see how the next game turns out.
And you were like the first guy to really make that jump from being extremely proficient in a sport, turning into an esport, making that jump to the real life version. Do you think that other people may follow in your path? You may look at yourself as the guy who opened that door.
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, there's a lot of really good drivers out there that have never gotten the chance to race in real cars, so hopefully they get that opportunity. And, I'd love to see it for sure.
And speaking of guys who get that opportunity, do you think that as far as iRacing goes, do you think that's something, all racers who are trying to aspire to get to that point, do you think it's something they should be spending their time doing?
I love iRacing. I think that, kind of the connection that it has between the sim world and real world, I think is really good. And I'm not sure how you really should get started in racing, whether it's go-karts or quarter midgets or whatnot, but I think that at least that's one way to get started.
Awesome. And you talked about Fortnite a little bit earlier. Is there any other esports that you're keeping your eye on?
I got some buddies that play Fortnite, but I've never really played, so I'll have to defer to them on that. Yeah.
For CheckpointXP, we're here with William Byron, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Appreciate it, man. That's going to do it for us here at the HyperX Esports Arena here at the Luxor. We want to thank the Las Vegas Motor Speedway and William Byron for inviting us out here, spending some time playing some NASCAR Heat 4 with us. Me personally, probably going to stick to Mario Kart in the future. But for CheckpointXP on campus, I've been Kevin, and we'll see you guys next time.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for watching, or if you happen to have gotten us from wherever you find your podcasts, thanks for listening to us. Now, before we jump into the matches for this weekend and what to expect, I want to remind you guys to head on over to CheckpointXP.com. We have a brand new redesigned website with a plethora of content from all over the esports and gaming sort of scenes. So go and give it a check, and that's where you can find us, of course, every Friday, as well as over at the Checkpoint XP YouTube. And, of course, if you need more Jake, because everyone always needs more Jake, make sure you head on over to twitch.tv/Jake_Overwatch, or I'm sorry, _OW, and give him a follow. Make sure that those notifications are turned on. So, we're going to start where we start this segment every week, and that is with our Match of the Week. So we were actually a little bit split on this one. We weren't sure whether or not to pick the Toronto or the Paris match, but we did both agree that one of these two Atlanta matches is going to be the one to watch out for. So for Jake, in your mind, if you could only watch one of these two, which one are you going to gravitate towards?
This is a tough call. I think I'm really excited to see Atlanta get out there and see what they can do this season. But I'm going to give it to the Toronto match. I think Toronto surprised me so much with that great, almost full reverse sweep against Philly, coming back against not only being down 2-0, but coming back against one of the most dominant teams that's on a hot streak right now. So I'm super excited to see more from Toronto, especially bringing out that dive style, which so far we've only ever seen, I think, from the Titans besides Toronto. So I'm really excited about Toronto. I think that they're going to maybe break some expectations, and I think that that's going to be a really exciting match to watch from both teams' perspective. So I'll give it to them. I think Paris-Atlanta is going to be a little bit more standard, a little bit more mirror matchy. So I think it'll be slightly less exciting, but I still think I'm psyched to see. I think there will be evenly matched teams in that mirror match. See who comes out on top.
Well, I'm going to have to agree with you on the Toronto-Atlanta match. I'm a big fan of all the players that they have on Toronto. They're the closest thing that I have to a Midwest team as well. So, they're kind of like my home team in a way. And anytime you can throw Surefour out there on the stage and just watch him pop off, I think is going to be a treat either way. So I'm going to give my match of the week to the Toronto versus Atlanta as well. Now, of course, this is going to be down in Houston at the Homestand. So some of the other matches we have going up here, we have New York versus Florida. Florida's shown a little bit more life than what we may have expected from them in the past. How well do you think they're going to match up against New York, though?
I think New York is the bear that has been poked right now. After losing to Philly and not looking great, I think that they are a team that is going to come back really strong. So, if Florida can put up much of a fight, I'll be really, really impressed. I think New York is going to be very fast, very aggressive this series. So I'm expecting it to be pretty dominant. But, never know. Florida has shown, flashes of greatness. They have had these players. Like, I love to see, BQB, especially on this McCree, popping off, Saya player, especially if they go to a map that can engage the Widow a little bit, can always be that X factor. So you never know with Florida. But I would say New York's going to have the advantage here.
All right, and going into this London versus the Outlaws match, what, if anything, do the Outlaws need to do to be able to contend with this rookie roster?
This is going to be an exciting one to watch because London has been so variable in their performance. Outlaws have obviously been struggling, but we also know that they've been sick with the flu, so especially their DPS line. So I think we still haven't seen the full potential of the Outlaws. If anything, it's just unlucky that they had to play so many matches this early in the season with people sick, right? I think it just kind of worked out against their favor. Whereas if they had only had 1 or 2 matches to lose while everyone's sick, then they could have been at a better start than they are now. So, I think it's going to be a major question of the health of the players. So I think there's some extent you can't really predict that unless you happen to be a medical doctor. Then I think you just can't know how it's going to shake out, because I do want to see though, who's performing. Can the Outlaws, can Blase step up? Can these players who've been sick, can they recover at home? No travel, this is maybe the time to recover, and a team like London is a team that is beatable, I would say, for the Outlaws. But I think it's definitely going to be a tough match.
Well, speaking of a team that's beatable, I'm pretty sure that the Philadelphia Fusion are going to come out on top in their Boston match as well. Boston, I'm sorry, but it's not looking good for you. London versus Florida should be another interesting match. Again, these are two teams that have shown some promise here thus far. Rookie side for London, and even though we don't really have rookies on the Florida side, again, been showing us some great stuff. Who would you predict comes out on top in this one?
This, I think, is going to be almost too close to call. I think of these teams actually as pretty similar, having these pop-off moments, but also moments where they make mistakes or they're not playing together perfectly, showing some inexperience. So I think both of these teams are so volatile and exciting. I think this could be another, sleeper match of the week. Just because I suspect it's going to just devolve into a total brawl of DPSing each other out. And those are always exciting to watch, especially with all the great DPS players both teams have to offer.
All right, well, it should be an interesting weekend. Nonetheless, that's all the time we have left for today. Thanks, guys, for joining us here on Owl's Nest, whether you watch us on YouTube or you downloaded the podcast. Thank you again to Flame for joining us as well. And remember to make sure to connect with us on social media. That's CheckpointXP on Facebook and Twitter, Checkpoint_XP on Instagram. And, of course, you can find Jake on Twitter at JakeOW and myself at Robbie_Landis CP. That's going to be it for us tonight, guys. See you next week. And remember to always stay on that payload.